In the previous course, we explored the border attribute of elements. This mostly causes individual items to be visually set off from the background or nearby elements. In this lesson, we'll look at how to put a frame around your whole web page to give it some more depth and a slightly richer flavor. Several years ago, I came across a website that had a page with a frame around it, and I liked it so much I incorporated much of that in many of my web pages for certain clients. However, at the time, I neglected to write down the URL of the original site, so I have no idea where these techniques and ideas came from. I'll begin with a web page copied from a site that I created earlier. Now, that site was designed to help the reader understand what to expect in a particular trip to Japan, and the layout is based on that original site. And here's what the final target web page should look like. Notice the page has a gray background, and the content resides in a box surrounded by the gray background. The top of the content has a blue to white kind of gradient. There is a slightly darker gray line around the content. These pieces describe the frame for this page. Now, the content includes a title centered across the whole frame, a left-hand section comprised mostly of navigational links, and a right-hand section comprising the page content. Then outside the content box is our copyright notice. We'll describe how to build this structure with HTML and CSS, including how to use some GIF images for constructing the frame. Let's get to it. There are a number of small GIF images that comprise the frame. These were borrowed from the site where I found this concept. However, a search on how to create GIF images returns a number of free and fee programs you can use to create your own GIF images, including using the Paint application in Windows. Note, some people say GIF and others say GIF, and whichever one you use, the other will grate on your ears, at least somewhat. But we'll carry on and not worry too much about this small discord. I began with the code I had found at that site, and I was determined to understand how it works. In the process, I found that I could simplify the code and get the same result. So, a lesson for everyone. When working with existing code, look to understand it as completely as possible, then look to simplify. Let's start with a style rule for the body of the page to at least provide the gray background. Here's the style rule that I chose based on my simplified version of the original. Body, background color, hashtag EEEEEE, color black, font family Arial, sans serif, font size 12 point, text align center, width 100%. So, we established the body to have this light gray background color, hashtag EEEEEE, and the default text color will be black. The default text font will be Arial, or if you can't find that font, use any sans serif font. 12 points in size and centered. And the body will take up 100% of the page width. Now, let's start the HTML with just the first and last text lines in the body. We begin with the traditional doc type and HTML statements, and then here's our head element, a title, what will this trip be like, and our meta, charset UTF-8. And the style, we have the body class that we talked about, and that's the end of the head. And in the body, I have two short paragraphs. First is the style of the trip, and that will ultimately become our page header. And then amper copy semicolon still plugging away LLC, all rights reserved. And that will become our copyright notice. And this displays in the browser this way. Well, okay, we have some work to do. Let's start with building the frame. First, we'll put the content inside the page, leaving some space around the edges to put the frame. So, main container, width 98%, margin auto, text align left, background white. URL styleparts/blue-header-gradation.gif repeat X, which says set up to 98% of the frame to be a box with a white background and an image repeated horizontally across the frame. The text will be aligned on the left. Margins will effectively be 0. The image blue-header-gradation.gif is a 1 pixel wide vertical line with blue at the top fading to white at the bottom. It's 110 pixels high. So we add this style rule to the style element and add a div with this as its class, containing the whole page except the copyright notice. So here's our style that we talked about. Here's our new main container style rule. And then in the body, we've added the div class equals main container. And it displays this way. I noticed 3 problems here. First, the margin on the left is wider than the margin on the right. Second, the gradient does not go all the way to the top of the page. And third, the text is lost in the gradient. Well, we fixed the first problem by adding a margin property to the body style rule. So we add margin auto. The auto value says to make the left and right margins equal. So now we get this. To solve the second problem, that is the gradient not going to the top of the page, will take some patience, but it will come. And we can fix the third problem easily, add a blank line above the text. So here's our P element with a non-breaking space, and then it gives us this. Now, of course, we can see the text, and we notice right away it's the wrong color, it's the wrong centering, and the wrong font size. So we introduce a new class, pTitle, for page title, as pTitle, font size 28 point, color hashtag 254db5, margin 0, text align center. Digression. What's with the color as hex number? Well, it gives you more flexibility than named colors. You can tell the number is hex because of the leading hashtag or number sign. So how do you convert from a color to a hex number? A search on color to hex codes will turn up a number of web-based apps where you can see a color and get the hex value, or enter the hex value and see the color. So this defines elements with 28 point size font of a deep blue shade with text centered. The margin 0 is needed to keep the browser from adding additional space around the element on top and bottom, and I found this out by doing some experiments. And now, of course, we assign this class to our text field. So in our body, we make that paragraph with class equals pTitle, and now we see this, which still has some issues, but we're moving in the right direction. Next, I'm going to concentrate on building the border. To do this, we'll use a small set of GIF images that came from the original site. Basically, I'm going to add a square on the left side of the main container and use repeat Y to repeat that image down the left side of the page. So after main container, I add this style rule, .border left, background URL styleparts/left.gif, repeat Y, left, top. Left.gif is an image, 7 pixels by 8 pixels, shading from left to right, light gray to medium gray. The browser is to take this square and position at the top left and repeat it down the page. Then in the body, we add this as a div element. So within the main container, we bracket the paragraphs of text, and now we see this. And this is subtle, but you can see the difference here. Next, we do a similar thing for the right border. First, the style rule, .border right, background, URL styleparts/right.gif, repeat Y, right, top. Right.gif is an image, 8 pixels by 8 pixels, shading from right to left, light gray to medium gray. And now we update our body again, insert a div for border right within our div for border left. And now we see the right border of the frame. Now clearly we need a bottom border, so we add dot border bottom background URL styleparts/bottom.gif. Repeat X left bottom. So bottom.gif is an image 7 pixels by 9 pixels, shading from bottom to top, light gray to medium gray. Notice we use repeat X, that is, repeat horizontal. And of course, we now embed a div for border bottom within border right, and the result, this clearly has our bottom border, but we seem to have cut off some of the text at the bottom. And we have some corners jutting out at us. We solve the first problem by inserting a blank line after the current text. So after our style of the trip, we have a paragraph with a non-breaking space, and that gives us this, so it clears the text. Now, as for the corners, we have 2 images for those, left bottom GIF and right bottom GIF. We'll add in left bottom GIF first. Left bottom GIF is a 17 pixel by 17 pixel image of a rounded corner with shading as before, that is here. So we'll add this style rule, dot border left bottom background URL styleparts/left-bottom.gif. No repeat left bottom. So notice the no repeat. We'll just have one of these appearing at the left bottom corner of the content. And so we modify our HTML body. We have a new div with class border left bottom nested within the class border bottom. And we can see the effect here. Notice the lower left corner is rounded, red circle, while the lower right corner is still unchanged, green circle, not surprisingly. Finally, for now, we'll add this style rule, border right bottom background URL styleparts/right-bottom.gif. No repeat, right bottom. Padding bottom 30 pixels, padding top 5 pixels. Now right bottom GIF is a 17 pixel by 17 pixel image of a rounded corner with shading as before, that is here. Notice once again we have no repeat, and there are 2 new parameters, padding bottom 30 pixels and padding top 5 pixels. As always with padding, the content of the padding area is the underlying image, so at the top we'll have the blue color and at the bottom we'll have the white. So now we install our border right bottom class div, and now it displays this way. Notice now we've solved the problem of the blue gradient not going all the way to the top of the page. We needed to get this last piece in place and then extend the padding. So now we're ready to develop the remaining content of the page. Since our target design has all the pieces except the copyright notice inside the framed box, we'll leave the title text as is at the top of the page. Let's put the left-hand column data, mostly links for navigation, into a block and call the style rule for this block nav boxes for navigation. So let's think about the properties of this box. We'll need a margin so it's not right up against the side. Let's try 5 pixels, not too big. Then we need to choose how wide it should be. Clearly small compared to the main area, but wide enough to show some text lines clearly. So at least as a start, we'll go with 16% of the available space. And finally, we need this box to stay on the left-hand side of the window. So for a first cut, we try this. Nav boxes, margin 5 pixels, width 16%, float left. So we have a 5 pixel margin on all 4 sides of this block. The width of 16% sets the size of this column, leaving the rest for the main page content. And the float left ensures all elements in this block are located on the left-hand side of the page. Inside the nav boxes block, we'll have one or more blocks I'll call side boxes. In our target result page, we have 2 side box blocks. So what about the properties for side box? Well, again, we'll need some margin, especially on the left. Try 3 pixels. And looking at the target layout, we could use a little padding in the left so this content is not right up against the margin. So let's try, say, 5 pixels of padding. So elements with class side box will have a margin on the left of 3 pixels, so 3 pixels in from the containing block, and a padding in the left of 5 pixels, so content will start 5 pixels from the left, sort of a small indentation. Inside each side box there will be a little text that describes the following embedded contents. For this text we'll use an H5 element with a class of side box title. To understand what we're talking about, consider this text in the first side box, the related links. So here's our first cut at the style rule. Height 20 pixels, margin 10 pixels, 3 pixels, 0 pixels, 3 pixels, padding left 5 pixels, border 1 pixel solid, hashtag 254DFF, border bottom 0 pixels, font size 12 pixels, color white, font family Verdana. And we use this style in the H5 element. The height of the H5 element will be 20 pixels. This is the line containing related links. The margin values say the box with related links will be down 10 pixels from the top of the containing side box with 3 pixels of space on the right and left and no extra spacing on the bottom. The border setting is interesting. The property sets a 1 pixel blue line all the way around and then overrides the bottom border with a size of 0 pixels. So we end up with a border line on the top and left and right sides, but not the bottom. By the way, removing the border bottom attribute did not substantially change the effect. The chosen font of 12 pixel white Verdana seems just fine. Following the title text will be the actual content of the side box. We use a style rule, class, called Side Panel Contents. Here's the rule and the thinking behind it. Side panel contents, overflow hidden. That says that if the content in the box is larger than the box, clip the content so the excess is not seen. For example, recall the second side panel contents box contains the picture of an airplane. This property ensures the picture will not spill over the box boundary. The padding and margin values have their usual meanings here. Background color hashtag DDF1FA says the background will be a light blue. The text color will be the default black. However, note that most of the text elements here are actually links, so they will normally appear with an underline and the standard color scheme for links. A medium dark blue if the link has not been visited, and purple if it has. The border properties specify the border on the left, right, and bottom to appear as a medium dark thin blue line, while there is no border at the top. Lastly, we set up the box to hold the main content, so we'll use a style rule called Content Column. In the sketch, it's the black rectangle on the right. Now, the most important factors are the width and the margin on the left. This box has to begin far enough over to the right to leave room for the side boxes, and it should take as much width as possible after allowing for the width of the side boxes. Maybe this. Content column margin 5 pixels, 4 pixels, 4 pixels, 17%, width 81%. Notice this box plus the nav boxes box take up 97% of the space on the page. The rest is taken up with various margins and padding. Also notice the left margin here is 17%, so we're allowing for the nav box's width of 16% plus a little extra before this column begins. Let's test this with just the minimal amount of content. So here we are, we've added our nav boxes, side box, an H5 with side box title, and our side panel contents and just the first link, trip home page. So the H5 element holds the title-related links in the side box with a class of side box title, and now we see this. Looks like the left side column stuff will work. Yay! But there's some issues with the trip home page line. The font size is larger than our target layout, and this could have implications as we add more and longer lines. The link has an underline, which is the standard appearance, but in our target layout you can see that links have a faint dotted line on the bottom, not a solid underline. And the text should be indented a bit to match our target layout. Well, we set a style for text to be 10 point instead of the default 12. Dot norm 10, font weight normal, font size 10 point. Font weight of normal to ensure we override any browser default font size of 10 point to set our size. Then there are a couple of clever ideas used here to solve the other issues. For A elements, we can override their standard appearance. For example, A, text decoration, none. Border bottom, 1 pixel, dotted, hashtag BB, which happens to be a shade of gray. To get the text line indented, we use a technique discussed in the previous course. If you specify two selectors with no comma between them, the effect is additive. For example, dot side panel contents P, padding left 4 pixels, padding right 4 pixels, margin 10 pixels, 0 pixels, which says for elements with a style rule of side panel contents, if there's a nested P element, that nested element will have these characteristics. To test this, we add the new style rules into our style element, and we do not need to modify any code in the body except for the P element in the side panel contents. So down here, we change this. And now we see this, which solves the problems we were looking at. And let's look at adding some minimal content to our right-hand column, the content column. But first, another digression. As we get deeper and deeper into this nest of div elements, it's easy to see how one can get lost. Here are some tricks to help you keep on track. First, indentation does not matter to the browser, but it does matter to you. Make sure each end div tag lines up with the corresponding start div tag. And here's how. When you code a div start tag, immediately press enter and space over to under that start tag and code your end tag. On the end div tag, you could add a comment. So this is an HTML comment identifying which div this is the end for. So you could say end of something special. And this way you've documented how it's paired. Then, if you're using Notepad, be sure you have the status bar checked. And when you do that, you can see what column the cursor is currently on by looking in the status bar. Make sure they start at the same column. Within a div element, indent the nested elements 1 or 2 spaces. If there's deep nesting, use 1 space, otherwise use 2 spaces. So for example, we could modify our previous code this way. And our big changes here are the addition of comments and the one-line entry in the content column section. And the result of this is here. Now the good news, the left-hand column looks like it'll work okay. The bad news, the right-hand column needs work. Well, a bit. And we expected that, so it's not really bad news. In our target result, the right-hand column has "What will this trip be like?" in a font the color of the top line, with a slightly smaller size, left aligned, and with an underscore line below it. As you might imagine, the underscore line is from the set of GIF images that were part of the site where I borrowed the ideas for this page layout. The originator chose an H2 element with a class of heading 1. Now this class looks something like this. Heading 1, font weight normal, font size 24 point, color hashtag 254DB5, margin 0 pixels, padding 0 pixels, margin bottom 12 pixels. Background URL styleparts/heading-1.gif, repeat X, center, bottom. Heading-1.gif is just 5 pixels high and 1 pixel wide, with medium blue center and lighter ends. Also, they specified a style for H2 elements in general this way: H2 font size 11 point, margin 1.07 0. When the H2 properties are merged with the heading 1 properties, the effective style for H2 class equals heading 1 becomes color #254db5 font weight normal font size 24 point. Set the font color, weight, and size. Margin top 0 pixel, margin right 0 pixel, margin bottom 12 pixel, margin left 0 pixel. So add some space below the line. And background in URL styleparts/heading-1.gif. Background repeat X, background position center, bottom. Build a horizontal line along the bottom of the text using the image. So then we simply add this class to our H2 element down here, and we now have this, which has two visible problems. First, the underline goes past the frame on the right, and second, the P in trip dips onto the line. We can solve the first problem by specifying a margin on the right, so margin right 2%. To solve the second problem, we need to introduce a new style property, line height, the height of the text for a line, specified as a length type value, typically using ems, the height of the letter M in the current font. Here we choose line height 1.5 M. Now this value is somewhat arbitrary, but it's chosen based on experiments and the coder's sense of aesthetics. Now if we add these two properties to the heading 1 style rule, our page now looks like this. Excellent! Quite a journey so far. But now we can start filling in the missing data. Let's start with the left column. Based on our model, the code inside the nav boxes block starts to look like this. So after the link to the trip home page, we add the rest of the links for the first part of the side box. Notice, of course, the use of the non-breaking space characters, ampersand, NBSP, semicolon, to indent the sign up to go line. And the result is this. At this point, the links box is longer than the content box. That's okay, but we will be adding more content shortly. In fact, let's first finish the links box. So some additional HTML following the code we just added, and now we add the destinations, resources, and contact us lines. Now we see the following. Notice the font for the bullet points is larger than for the rest of the links box. So we need to set the owning UL elements to be a class of norm 10. And while we're at it, a minor thing, but I would like to see destinations, resources, and contact us with a little more space above and a little less space below, so they're closer to the bullet points they are headers for. So after some trial and error, I decided on class BH for bullets header as .bh, padding top 18 pixels, line height 0.2 M. So add this class to our style element. Then in the HTML body, add this new BH class to the 3 bullet header paragraphs in addition to their current norm 10 class. And assign class norm 10 to the UL elements, giving a slightly better appearance, I think. Now this step may seem petty, but I think it has to be done at some point so that at the end you have a page that is more visually intuitive for the user. And the sooner you can do this, the better. Now you may recall in our target page we have a second box in the left-hand column. So let's add that so that we're done with the left-hand column. So we have a new side box entry along with its side box title and its side panel contents, which in this case is primarily the image element. So we've added our second box inside the left-hand column, and now we got this. Now here I've scrolled down to the bottom of the page. Whew, we're good. Now for the right-hand column, the real content. Looking at the target page, after our heading line of what will this trip be like, we see a second level heading, so an H2 element, followed by an unordered list, so a UL element with LI subelements, and one of these LI subelements has a nested UL element of one LI element within it. Another heading, H2, with obviously a different style rule. Let's call it heading -1-1, and we'll examine it shortly. Another unordered list, UL, with 2 elements, and at the bottom, the copyright notice. So, reading text and converting to HTML, our next cut has this. Starting with the end of nav boxes and the beginning of content column, here's the H2 heading we had before with a class of heading -1, followed by the plain H2 heading. Then each of the bullets on the web page comes from an LI element in the HTML code. Here's the embedded bullet point. Here's our other header with its class of heading -1-1, and the last 2 bullet points, then the rest as before. And this yields this page. Compare the target layout to the current status, and we see the following areas to work on. The list elements are not spaced as nicely as on the target. The last header needs the heading -1-1 style information we mentioned earlier, and the copyright notice needs some style. For the spacing of the LI elements, set a class for LI elements to have more space above and below, such as .li space margin 20 pixels, and then add class equals LI space to each LI tag in the content column box. Notice I did not specify this as a rule for all LI elements because there are LI elements in the nav boxes part that we do not want to have this spacing. The last header in the target looks similar to the header at the top of the page, but is done without using a GIF file. So we come up with this. See if you can explain how this creates the desired output. Heading -1-1, font weight normal, font size 21 point, font style italic, color #254db5, border bottom 1 pixel solid, #254db5, margin 20 pixels, margin right 2%, line height 1.2 m. So, using the new heading -1-1 and LI space style rules, we now have in our body the update of all the LI elements with the class. And then this gives us this. Oops, forgot about the copyright paragraph. Now usually these are set in smaller fonts and centered, so I'll choose .footer, margin 10 pixels, 0 pixels, font size 8 point, text align center, and background #EEEEEE. And adding this class to the last paragraph, so P class equals footer, amper copy semicolon, still plugging away LLC, all rights reserved, gives us this at the bottom of the page. So, as you can see, just a small difference in the copyright line, smaller font, different spacing. And now we're ready to check if we're at our destination. Do we need to tweak our code at all to make it even closer to our target, or maybe better than the original target? So again, there's on the left our original target, and here's our current result. Any areas that might need a little tweaking? Maybe. The title lines in the side boxes are a little more nicely centered vertically in the target than in the result. Solution: add line height 1.5 m to side box title. The spacing after the title line in the result should be a little less. Solution: add a new class for thin lines, .thin font size 10 pixels. Then in the blank line paragraph, make the start tag P class equals thin. And oops, forgot to put the year in the copyright notice. Solution, add in the year in the copyright text. Finally, giving us our desired result. Whew. It's been a rich, complicated session, including how to build a frame from a few GIF images, how to make sure your indentation is correct. We demonstrated a process for building out a whole page, and we introduced the line height styles property. My hope is that you can take information presented here and create your own unique versions to meet your needs. Now, whenever I say some trial and error, you should feel free to experiment with different values for properties, or even deleting some properties and/or adding some properties. This is how you really begin to understand the impact of various style properties on the rendered page. So here's a quick demo on one way to do that. You're going to navigate to the file you want to work with, double-click the file name to open in a browser, and then go back to the directory list, Alt-Tab, with your file and right-click the file name, opening the file with Notepad, or whatever your text editor is. You now have one window with your code and one window showing the code displayed in a browser. Alt-Tab swaps you between the two windows. So you make a change in your code, do Control-S to save your change, Alt-Tab to the browser, refresh the browser to see the effect of the change, and you repeat these steps until you get the look you want. So let's look at working with the line height in that last piece of code to see how this might work. So now we're looking at some trial and error experimentation here for fixing the titles over on the side box, like related links and taking off. I'd like to have them more centered vertically. So I've navigated to the web page and also to the HTML, and I'm at side box title, and I'm going to add line height colon, and let's try 1em to start, just to see how that impacts things. So now I'll do a Control-S to save the change, and then tab over to my web page, and I'll watch related links when I refresh. Oh, it took it up. That's not what I want. So it's clearly in the wrong direction. So I go back over here, and let's see what happens with 2em. And I go back to my web page and refresh. Nothing happens. Oh, I forgot to do a save. If you're using Notepad, in the title line next to the file name, you'll see an asterisk if the file has been changed but not saved. So that's a good visual clue. So now I do a Control-S and then go back to my HTML and refresh that page, and it's too far down on the bottom. So it looks like maybe halfway through would do it. So let's try 1.5em and a Control-S to save, and then over to the HTML page and refresh, watch related links. Ah, perfect. And that's what I mean. Now, of course, if you're doing this with your web page on your server, after you save your HTML, then you're going to have to upload the changed HTML to the server before you refresh. In the next video, we demonstrate using the same basic design for another page, so carrying over the techniques to another website. And we introduce box shadows. See you there.